Good morning, and welcome back to the channel. I'd like to try to tell the story of early M1 Garand production and the related issues and development that took place in that pre-war time period. I happen to have a fairly low serial number M1 that I'll use as a vehicle to talk about this, and I'll also try to roll in photos where possible. In particular, I'll try to get some good footage of the 7th round stoppage repair, see exactly what that looks like, and maybe how to spot fake no-pair receivers while we're at it. So let's get started. The M1 rifle was formally adopted January 9th, 1936. M1s start rolling off the assembly line in 1937. And manufacturing doesn't start to hit its stride until 1939. So all of these M1s would have been of the gas trap variety, meaning there is a gas cylinder attached to the muzzle of the barrel that would capture gas to run the action after the bullet has left the rifling. The thought process at the time was that drilling a gas port in the barrel was a weakness and should be avoided, but it didn't take a lot of time for the gas trap system to begin to show some shortcomings. So, for example, during the 1939 NRA national matches, competitors noted that the front sight on the early M1s had the tendency to shift around, which they didn't like. They also noted that carbon deposit buildup on the inside of the gas trap system interfered with accuracy. At the same time, the Army was taking notes of their own. The Army concluded that the bayonet mount on the original M1 was weak because of that gas cylinder that was attached to the muzzle. They concluded the design was overly complex, difficult to clean. And lastly, they noted there was the possibility for the gas trap assembly to walk out of alignment and cause a bullet strike, which happened at least once during testing. So as a result, the redesigned gas port system was adopted October 26, 1939, which translates to serial number 18,000-ish. But by the time that was adopted, Springfield Armory already manufactured parts to assemble another 32 to 33,000 rifles, meaning gas trap M1s were built up to around serial number 50,000. So this rifle was built in January of 1940 with a serial number in the 27,000 range, which puts it solidly within that window of rifles built as gas traps but after adoption of the gas port. The gas trap M1s did see combat early in World War II, such as in places like the Philippines, and despite the shortcomings of the gas trap, they were still generally well liked because they were still, having that semi-auto was still such an advantage over bolt actions in combat, even if your semi-auto is a gas trap. So as those original M1s came back for repair, they would have been updated to the gas port system, which is what you see on basically every M1 now. Then, after the war, in 1947, an order went out to scrap any surviving gas trap rifles, making unmodified gas trap M1s exceedingly rare. So, this one has long since lost its gas trap parts, and mechanically is just a standard gas port M1. But the one surviving thing from the pre-war period that you can still see is the 7th round stoppage repair. So rewind to the late 1930s as production of M1 rifles is ramping up. these rifles develop a failure to feed on the second to last round, so the 7th round, and only when that round is presented on the left-hand side. This issue was new and was not an issue during pre-production prototype rifles, and inconsistent enough to make diagnosing the problem difficult. So this malfunction was widespread enough that it was becoming an issue of national security. Army ordnance went as far as to preload clips that made sure the 7th round presented on the right hand at demonstrations and such, while they figured out what this problem was. So remember, this is the same time that all those NRA national match competitors are already kind of unimpressed with the M1 and had these widespread reliability issues become public knowledge. I think it's possible that it could legitimately have jeopardized the M1 program. The US military at the time kind of has a track record of dropping rifles over less. So, for example, the early 10-shot 276 caliber Garands were well liked, but they were dropped over fear of logistics. And then, for example, take the 1917 rifles, were pretty much dropped after World War I, despite having been manufactured in large numbers. I know they were a second standard rifle, but still. The problem was, while tooling up the assembly line, one of the milling operations that cut the hole in the receiver for the barrel was allowed to over-travel too far into the receiver and was cutting off the top portion of the front left guide rib. So this left cartridges on the left-hand side slightly less supported during feeding, and the issue presented on the 7th round when magazine spring pressure was decreased enough to allow the last few rounds to misfeed. So by the time Springfield Armory figured this out in early 1940, they had already built 40,000 rifles and receivers. So rifle serial numbers 35091 and 35093 were the first two rifles modified by welding a bead where the missing material should be, and then remachining the guide rib back to the correct dimensions. Those two rifles were sent to Frankfurt Arsenal in Philadelphia for testing in March of 1940, where they each fired 1,000 rounds with no malfunctions. This repair was then accepted, and Springfield issued a recall to make this repair to all the affected rifles, so up to serial number 40,000 or so, which includes this rifle. If you have a Springfield Armory rifle in the serial number in the low 40,000s or below, take a look at this front left guide rib, and you should be able to see that repair. Note the color change between the gray-green Parkerized receiver and the repair, which is more silver in color. So the silver is where that weld bead was added and then machined, and then machined back into shape. Also note the black discoloration on the receiver right there, and then there. So that black discoloration in the receiver is a result of that welding process. So if you're a collector looking for an original, unrepaired early receiver, be very careful of fakes. It's not hard to grind this rib back down and try to pass it off as an unmodified gun. So look for that black discoloration from the weld, which is usually difficult to hide. Then look how deep the cut is. The original cut would have been consistent, and only that much material should have been removed. If the cut is significantly deeper, it's probably faked. If the cut looks right, it's that right depth, down to about there. And there's no discoloration from the welds, still be extremely skeptical and look for other signs of refinishing, rebuilds, and fakery. Be very careful before putting your money down. I think that should just about wrap up the history I wanted to cover. Thank you very much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And take care.